Hello, welcome back. If you've watched my video introducing developmental language disorder, I'm now going to do a quick flash talk on camouflaging, which is something my lab has been interested in the last few years and that we're currently actively working on at the moment. So you might have come across camouflaging or masking in the context of autism. So there we would define camouflaging or masking as behaviours that an autistic child or young person does that are masking or covering up their autistic difficulties or differences. And it's important to mention that some of these behaviours people might know that they're doing it to mask a particular thing, but for some people their masking can be pretty unconscious, especially if they've been doing it for as long as they can remember. It might become quite automatic. So we know from the research on autism and masking that these behaviours can help autistic people to fit into social norms or societal norms and sort of pass as neurotypical. Now that might be helpful sometimes if you're trying to make friends or if you're just trying to get through life. However, we also know that high amounts of masking or camouflaging can be exhausting. It can disrupt one's sense of identity as you're almost putting on a performance for lots and lots of different people. If you're masking very well, this may actually delay the identification of your autism and therefore your diagnosis, and overall it's a negative predictor of mental health. So although there may be some short-term benefits when masking, it seems that the overall picture is that this can be a fairly negative thing. So really we were interested in whether something similar might actually be also happening in developmental language disorder. We'd had some reports from families who were working with our lab on other projects talking about, for example, their child getting into trouble copying at school. And we'd even had some experiences of children camouflaging in our own testing sessions, so where they're sort of trying to pretend that they've understood what we're asking them to do, rather than say, I didn't understand that, what could you say again? So the work we've done so far has indeed suggested that young people or children are camouflaging their DLD. So we gathered these ideas by interviewing parents and speech and language therapists who work with children with DLD about whether they think they see camouflaging and what that camouflaging might be like. And this is a sort of visual summary of the sorts of camouflaging strategies they told us about. So they included things like conversational skills. This could include steering a conversational partner towards a topic that a child knows a lot about and where they know more of the vocabulary, so they're more able to have a sort of normal conversation about that topic. Personally, I do think that is likely to make a child or young person actually look a bit autistic, because it might look like a restricted and repetitive interest, whereas actually what they're doing is they're trying to take you to a conversation where they can seem like a sort of more capable conversational partner. The other sorts of conversational skills we heard were the use of phrases that didn't give away that the child hadn't understood something, but sort of tried to move something on or avoid going any further. So phrases like, oh, I don't know, being very quick to say I don't know, or I'm just tired today, or oh, I forgot. So those sorts of phrases. Relying on others was something that came up. This could be siblings, peers, parents, sort of leaving time for people to finish a sentence for you. And over time, people perhaps don't realise that they're sort of filling in words for you. We had a lot of different strategies that were associated with avoidance in some way. So this could be selecting play partners who are quite a bit younger than you, or hanging around the adults who might accommodate more for your language difficulties, avoiding certain forms of play or tasks that are likely to be too linguistically demanding for you. Non-verbal strategies included, using a lot of gesture when you're communicating. So nodding a lot, so using gesture that sort of gives off a sense that you understand more than you actually do. For some of our participants, our parents and our speech language therapists, they described some camouflaging behaviour such as giddiness or silliness, perhaps even spilling over into behavioural problems. And here our impression was that sometimes children try to deflect from a difficult conversation by using humour or trying to distract people away from the fact that they haven't understood something. Using other cognitive abilities was also mentioned. So for some of our children being talked about by our participants, they said they were quite good readers. And this meant that in a class situation, they weren't really being they weren't really calling the adult's attention to them, because if they were asked to read something, they could read it, so it was assumed the child was fine. So other cognitive abilities were kind of covering up this problem with language. Copying was a specific behaviour that came up a lot. Looking around, seeing what other people are doing. If the teacher gives some complex instructions about what to do next, if everybody else starts to line up, you might realise it's probably time to line up and get your coat, for example. We also heard a lot about pro-social strategies, so children being very, very friendly, very, very smiley, as a sort of means to be liked, and to kind of cover up a language need and sort of still be included in a peer group, or be thought well of by one's teachers or other adults. So why is it that children are doing this? So these were some of the motivations that came up for why children might be camouflaging. So participants thought that, underlying a lot of these behaviours was the fact that children want to please. They want to please adults, they want to say the right thing, and they want to avoid getting into trouble. So they don't want to be punished. And quite a few parents and speech language therapists reported situations where a child had said that they didn't understand something to a teacher and adult, and they'd kind of been punished for that. Why didn't you listen the first time I asked you? I've already told you twice, that kind of thing. If that happens enough, you're just going to stop saying you don't understand stuff, because it just gets you into trouble. There was also this desire to fit in, so particularly with peer groups. So camouflaging perhaps because you want to be like other people and you want them to like you. In terms of what the impacts are of camouflaging, so I mentioned what we knew about the autism literature, and I would say we're seeing a similar picture emerging in DLD and camouflaging. So this is one quote from a speech language therapist who was working with a teenage boy with DLD, and he admitted to her that he is not a very serious person. He loves humour, he loves having a joke, but in the context of a peer group where the banter is so quick, he can't keep up and process the jokes. He doesn't want to laugh at the wrong thing or say something silly, so the easiest way to cope with that is just to be silent and appear to have a very stony and serious exterior. Another impact that we noted was the potential for masking to impact on the perceived level of need. So this was a speech language therapist who described a situation where a teaching assistant sat in while she did some language assessments, and at the end the assistant said she was messing you about, she was having you on, she did know what you were asking, or she did know that word. So a child that's masking very well might be perceived by others in the environment to not have language problems, perhaps even when a speech and language therapist then presents them with an assessment saying actually the language problems are present. We also heard about impacts on children and young people's mental health. This was particularly from the parents, I would say. These are some examples. What parents reported pretty consistently was that children would get home and be very, very exhausted, having worked extra hard to try and keep up performance all day, and it meant that their children were very emotional and very sensitive when they got home. So parent 4 here is describing that feeling of being a Coke bottle that's been fizzed up all day, and then when she gets home it's sort of like an explosion. Okay, so that's just a quick introduction, a bit of an overview of what we know so far. We are still working on this very actively. We're currently interviewing young people with developmental language disorder about their experiences camouflaging, and we've already had some really interesting interviews, some of which I would say largely support what we've heard from parents and speech language therapists, which is reassuring. We're also developing a parent report measure, like a checklist of camouflaging for DLD type difficulties. So we're doing that project at the moment. So if you're watching this in October 2024, we're still doing this. And if you'd be interested in helping us with that, we do need more families, both with and without DLD, to help us with that measure. So do get in touch. I've popped my email down there. Or if you're just interested in watching this in the future and want to know what happened, please feel free to email me. Thank you very much.